in a new series that I said last week that I was hugely excited about. And it is for this simple reason that I believe that you and I grow from the power of our testimonies. The Bible says it, we overcome by the blood of the Lamb and the word of our testimony. The beauty is, though, that we overcome through other people's testimonies. There is moments where you telling me what God did for you changes what I'm believing for me. I said this in the second service, and I just need you not to judge me, okay? Everyone knows that I can be a little emotionally extra. I don't appreciate the laughter. But there was a time in my life where I legitimately looked up into the heavens and I said this: why, God, have you chosen me to be the next Job? Now, that might not hit if you're not familiar with the story, but like Job lost family, lost everything, was covered in boils, lost wealth, and I'm here talking to God, holding him to account and asking him, why me? Like, why'd you make me Job, God? Like, for what? I don't know. I thought that that's how bad it was, but for some reason, that's how extreme it got for me. I imagined that it was bad until I went to this pastor's retreat, and like, they start open, and I was looking at them with a little bit of contempt. Like, you don't have it as bad as me? Because every pastor will tell you this is the hardest city to build church in. And then all of a sudden, they start like, it was like an open share, which is always my favorite. Love a bit of open sharing. And they started talking about their challenges, and I hear one pastor talk about the fact that he had been diagnosed with diabetes, and he had already had a kidney transplant, and how another guy had his whole church split, and another person, like their daughters were just out of the house. And I was like, all of a sudden, I started to realize that when you stop living your life out in front of people, you start feeling like maybe you've got it worse than you do. It's funny how when you don't get around other believers, you start to believe that you've been forgotten. It is incredible to think that we start to feel that maybe there's not a breakthrough for people like you or me. So enter this series titled Anomaly. Why Anomaly? Because it is a beautiful indication of what you and I are once we collide with God. An anomaly is the simplicity that there is an expectation of how this is going to go. I've seen people like that before. I know how this goes. I've been in circumstances like this. I know how this goes. My family is always in these moments. I know how this goes. But the definition of an anomaly is a deviation from normal or expected. So, I want to put this to you. I know that you would have a normal in your life. I know that you'd have expectations of how that doctor's report is going to go, how this relationship will probably mimic the last, how this church will probably let you down like the other one, and how this job will never appreciate. But what if what we are missing is a deviation? What if we're missing an opportunity to just change tact? We are about to hear for the next 4 weeks stories, testimonies of everyday real believers, not favorites of God, people that have gone through it, going through it, getting through it, so that you and I might understand that we are not forgotten. No. Because this is what happens when you are forgotten. You actually often deviate in the wrong place. I'm about to reveal a little bit of my age here. Which, by the way, getting old, people just start blaming you for old things. Like Izzy today during rehearsal said a dad joke. No one said to her, oh, you're getting old. They were just like, oh, it's just a dad joke. I do a dad joke and people are like, oh, you're getting so old. No, I'm not, okay? My hamstrings just hurt because they hurt. But I was in a day where like you didn't have cell phones, so if you hooked up to meet with a friend and they didn't show up in time, you'd often think, oh, they forgot me. And then this would be the question: do I stay or do I go to where I think they might be? And then you miss each other inevitably, and then you never see anyone, and you're lost, wandering through the wilderness of life, feeling lonely. Previous hurts again. But my point is this: when we feel forgotten, we start moving from our last post. So, in this series, what we're going to learn is through other people's stories, we've not been forgotten. We're going to glean principles and understand that God has a plan for you, and we're going to go into this with this verse. Go to Hebrews for me and let's read this. It says this: "Therefore, since we are surrounded by such a great cloud of witnesses, let us throw off everything that hinders the sin that so easily entangles, and let us run with perseverance," meaning you're going to have to push through some things. The race marked out for us. I'm going to finish right there. There is a race marked out for you. And over these next 4 weeks, my hope and my prayer is through other people's testimonies, stories, and the principles of the word in actual effect in their life, that you would understand this. Maybe there are some dreams you've got to get out of storage. Maybe there are some things you've got to dust off the shelf. Maybe there are some mindsets you've got to shift from. And maybe the problem is not the norm in your life, but the lack of deviating and understanding that God's got something for us. We've got an incredible speaker today, Jimmy Walters from Australia, living here. So we're going to throw over to the screen and we're going to watch a portion of a clip, and it's going to tell us a little bit about his story, his life, and then he's going to come up, speak a life-giving message. Are you ready? Come on, let's look to the screen.
What I did before I got into ministry was I was an outdoor adventure instructor. So school groups, church groups, corporate groups. The outdoor adventure job, it was the dream situation for me. I was working for the state government, so the salary was far higher than any other job I could have gotten out of my studies. And I thought that was my career. I thought that was what I was going to do for years. But then I started wrestling with these promptings, these desires, these tugs from the heart to pursue ministry. I was seeing those Bible college advertisements on a Sunday in church, and I was entertaining the idea, but I was talking myself out of it because of how I'm wired. I just thought I would struggle with it. I didn't think it was for me, even though the desire was there. And what happened was, I hadn't told anybody what I was wrestling with, but one Sunday night, Pastor Chris was preaching, and he, in the middle of his preach, he stopped and pointed to me and just said that God had given him a word for me, and it was that God had put something new for me to pursue, to chase after, and I was letting my past experiences dictate my decision making. And God wanted to let me know that he was going to be with me every single step. I made that decision, and then fast forward a couple of months and I was on this short-term missions trip with my church in Japan, Osaka, helping out a church that was 6 months old. And everything fell into place on that trip. I could finally make sense of what those desires, those tugs were for, and it was to be involved in church planting overseas. The fire was ignited on that trip, and I went, before that trip, reluctant to go into ministry, to coming home from that trip 100% convinced from the age of 20 years old that ministry was for me.
How you going, church? All right, so my name is Jimmy. My wife Leah is just there, and I'm going to wreck the ending of the story, and that is we did arrive in Chicago. Yeah, but please stay for the whole thing. I'd love to share with you our story, our journey. You can take a seat. Point number one, the race marked out for you. From that young age, I was always so fixated on this concept that God, the creator of the universe, is so loving, so caring that he's got something planned for each of us. In 1 Corinthians chapter 12, the Apostle Paul is writing to the church of Corinth, and he's telling them, hey, when the Holy Spirit comes and lives inside of you, he's going to give you gifts. And that is for God to outwork his plan over the earth. Like, how humbling is that he would choose each and every single one of us? Then you read in John chapter 16, as Jesus is giving the disciples a heads up. He's giving them a heads up on what the role of the Holy Spirit is. He said, and he describes him as the divine encourager. The divine encourager will come and guide you in truth, speak to you what he's heard from the Father, and reveal prophetically what is to come. So we've got this incredible race marked out for you. That Hebrews chapter 12, verse 1-3 passage, it's on my wedding ring. I just want to read that line again. Therefore, since we are surrounded by such a great cloud of witnesses, let us throw off everything that hinders and the sin that so easily entangles, and let us run with perseverance the race marked out for us, fixing our eyes on Jesus. It was so exciting coming back from that missions trip, knowing, ministry is for me. But as a lot of you can testify, just because God gives you a promise doesn't mean you then you just appear in the calling, in the race. There is a journey. There are stepping stones. And maybe there are people here who've been coming for a while. You've got that passionate relationship with Jesus, but you have no idea what it is, where to be, what it's going to look like. Maybe you are here knowing the promises, but you are so far removed from the reality. Maybe you're in a lag season. I just want to encourage you that God has not forgotten you. In Psalm 34, it says, the eyes of the Lord are on the righteous. His ears are attentive to their cry. So know that you are not forgotten. He is here with you, leading you through the lag. The lag. Maybe you're sitting here and you are definitely in it. You've got all this fruit to show for it. And my encouragement for you is it's not about slowing down. It's about to ramp up even more. There's going to be the promises that God has spoken over you are going to completely, what's a better word than wow you? I don't know. You're just going to be in wonder of just how good God is. And maybe you're sitting here and you have no idea what to think of this. It's your first time, or maybe the 10th time. Your friend, your family member keeps dragging you to church and you have no idea. But I just want to encourage you that God has a race marked out for you. And aren't you curious? Even if there's 1% of you that thinks, oh yeah, this creator might be real, isn't there just 1% curiosity in you to find out what it is, why God has placed you in the city of Chicago for such a time as this? Leah and I, we were, even as singles, we both wanted the same thing. And then as we started dating, it was very easy, the dating season. We got married. It consumed every conversation, every dream. We even, leading up to the wedding day, we didn't ask for gifts. We asked for cash donations because we were expecting God to reveal the city, the country, the nation that he was leading us to. And we got nothing. Nothing was revealed to us in those early years. Even when we were traveling around the world, going on vacations, every time we would fly in or drive to a city, we were expecting, and so we were praying for God to speak. I was thinking something supernatural, like an angel sprinkling gold dust over the city sign as we're entering, or maybe as we're walking through the airport terminal, the lights are flickering. Something supernatural, but we heard nothing. 5.5 years ago, when we were visiting America, we came to Chicago, and we were joking, Leah and I, that, if only Chris and Audrey were in a different city, in a different country, we would move immediately. Joke's on us. We are here, we're loving Chicago. It was many years of this type of conversations and dreaming. And I just want to ask you, when was the last time you sat at the feet of Jesus and you asked just the most humbling question, and that is, where do you want me? Where do you want me? I think it's so important to have a loose grip of it. So many of us have got white knuckles, clinching onto what we think is the thing, which means we miss out on the real thing, what God is tugging us, prompting us towards. When I was 30, I was just getting so frustrated. And at the time, I didn't know if it was because of just frustration due to the opportunities around me or whether it was the Holy Spirit promptings. And I was chatting with, some of you will remember them, Josh and Kelly Goulding. This was before they came to Chicago in that stint. And as I was talking with him, I had this very simple vision. And again, it was nothing supernatural. His living room lights weren't flickering. It was just a picture of me sitting on my hands like an innocent schoolboy on a stool, waiting to be told what to do by the teacher as they were pacing back and forth. And there are multiple doors in front of me. One labeled Australia, the Gold Coast, one Chicago, and then a few other doors, locations around the world. And then the next part of the picture, the image, was then me standing up instead of waiting to be told. And then I was going up to each door, playing with the door handle, bumping it, prying it open, having a look at what's inside, and then deciding for myself whether to step into it. And so the way Leah and I interpreted this was, all right, we're going to say yes to all things Gold Coast, which is where we're from. Everything Gold Coast related. We're just going to say yes for the next year or two. We're going to give it our all. The verse that God dropped on my heart during that vision was Psalm 23. And it was, we've been singing it the last few weeks. Surely your goodness and love will follow me all the days of my life. Meaning, whichever door we open, whichever door we step through, his favor is going to be there. I was so gripped by fear of making the wrong decision that I wasn't making a decision. Now, let me just preface here, case by case here. I don't want you walking out of church thinking the guy at the front just said, I can just open every door. I'm not saying you're jumping from relationship to relationship, career to career. There's obviously the journey, and this is what God was speaking to Leah and I about. And so we went all out with Gold Coast, Australia. And when I say it was good, I mean it was good. I finally, after all those years, was put on staff at the church I was in. Leah was getting job promotions, pay rises. We got a house on the same street as her parents, but wait there. You'd think that was a negative. It was 250 yards from the beach. All right, so this was the dream setup in the beautiful weather of the Gold Coast, and yet 1.5-ish years into this life, this door, it hit me like a ton of bricks one week. I just felt, what am I doing? This is someone else's dream life. This isn't the race marked out for me. As I'm speaking, are you sitting here right now thinking, yeah, actually, this isn't the race marked out for me either? When was the last time you sat at Jesus' feet and did a reevaluation of exactly where you're at? Are you gripping it tight? Are you showing white knuckles? Or have you got your life, whatever it is, your business idea, your relationships, your ministry, whatever it may look like, have you got it in a loose grip? Asking God, what is the race marked out for me? Where do you want me? What do you want to do with me? I spoke to Leah that week. She had the exact same encounter with God that week. So that was us closing the Gold Coast door. It wasn't bad. Surely his goodness and love will follow me all the days of my life. It was good. It was amazing. The grass could not get any greener. But that was us closing the door and moving to the Chicago door. And it started off with selling the house. That was a big faith step. COVID hit, so things got complicated. We needed to get to the country through Leah's work, her career. That was the only visa available. So we started going through those hoops. Turned out this small company in Chicago that Leah had applied for, turned out they knew Leah's boss, and they walked through Leah's office on the Gold Coast a few years ago. They didn't know each other. And so because of that relationship, they called Leah's boss instantly, before Leah even had a chance to tell her bosses, hey, can you be a reference for me? Leah's boss retaliates by giving her a pay rise and a promotion. More icing on the cake of, oh, do we really want to keep this door closed? We get the job offer from them. And so it's party mode now. We are ready to celebrate. We are selling off everything. We do the farewell party. Now, because in Australia, COVID was pretty tricky, it wasn't as simple as just going to a US consulate appointment. We had to, it depended which state we were in. And so we were getting mucked around a lot. We were meant to have arrived in America end of June, early July. It is now, after the third attempt of the visa appointment, it is now early August and we're in Melbourne, the belly of the beast of COVID for Australia. We could not go back to the Gold Coast unless we paid for 2 weeks of hotel quarantining. So it's a Wednesday morning. full of excitement, the race marked out for us, 10 years of this dream, and us well and truly prying that Chicago door. And as we're getting ready with our 4 suitcases, no other belongings, everything's sold off, Leah opens up the email that absolutely crushes us. And so that leads me to my second point. What is your default setting?
The other miracle that is paired with this first job offer is Leah used to drive this route to and from certain jobs. And there was this block of land, and there was a sign in December of 2020 that said 7-Eleven opening soon. And this was a week where Leah and I were just getting discouraged, thinking, are we ever going to get to Chicago? And so she prayed to God when she saw that 7-Eleven sign. She goes, God, I want our ticket overseas before that 7-Eleven opens. And so then months had passed. Every time she's driving past that block, she's seeing the 7-Eleven get built out of the ground. Sometimes she's got lots of faith, sometimes lacking faith. And on that Wednesday morning, Leah opens up her email, sees the formal job offer, and that day she's driving that route past that 7-Eleven development site, and it was the opening day of 7-Eleven. And so you just think, like, gee, God is so in this. Like, the fact that this random small company out of all of USA, based in Chicago, happened to know Leah's bosses really well and asked for a direct reference on that morning. She sent out the application. And then for the 7-Eleven story to come out of it, we were convinced that God was in it. The biggest challenge with stepping out in faith was when that first job offer fell through. And so to be in that hotel room on that Wednesday morning, getting ready for our 3rd attempt of a visa appointment, and then Leah opening up her emails and seeing that the job offer had been pulled, I was crushed. Something I'd been, and Leah had been dreaming about for years, to have been pulled from us so abruptly. It was, the thought that came into my mind on that morning was, that's just so cruel. I'd be lying if I didn't say there were still moments where I doubted, will this job come around? And, was it going to be 1 month? Was it going to be 1 year? We just had no idea what to expect.
What is your default setting? What do you do when disappointment comes? When you're doing everything right, stepping out in faith, and then you get confronted with heartbreak, heartache, discouragement. There's a passage I want to go through, Acts chapter 16, verse 23-34. This is Paul and Silas going around to all the different communities preaching the gospel. And Paul receives a vision to go to Macedonia. And so he is stepping out in the race marked out for him. And things turn bad. Verse 23, after they had been severely flogged in Macedonia, they were thrown into prison, and the jailer was commanded to guard them carefully. When he received these orders, he put them in the inner cell and fastened their feet in the stocks. Get this bit. About midnight, Paul and Silas were praying and singing hymns to God, and the other prisoners were listening to them. It keeps going, but I just want to pause there. I think, even though it's a great ending, the jailer gets saved, he and his household. Even if that ending never happened, I think that captures what our default setting should be. Have you handled disappointment? What should our default setting be? Do you stay at your seat when it's prayer time in our services because there were those 3 occasions where your prayer didn't get answered the way you wanted it to? Have you stopped inviting family and friends because they always say no, and so what's the point? Have you given up on that ministry dream, that business idea? I think of my mum, where the rock in our family, so she raised us My dad passed away when we were young, so she was the rock, raising us as we were teenagers. And then through an awful, disappointing season she had, halfway through Bible college, she packed things up. All her Bible college books were stuffed into a box, including her Bible, put it into storage. Her words were, years later, as she shared the story with us, that she has threw in the towel. She has stopped wanting to play. Every disappointment, every discouragement, every slap in the face that we get as we run this race marked out for us, it has the opportunity to nudge us a step away from our original settings. And the next time it happens, you get nudged further away. Whether it's in the hour, it's in the week, or like my mum, it was 10 years. So far away from her, from our, as followers of Christ, our original default settings. The miracle is, and again, it's funny how this is the theme, my mum didn't have a supernatural encounter 10 years later. It was just that tiny little nudge that you might be experiencing this morning, today. It was that little nudge that she pulled the Bible out of the box. She didn't enroll straight into Bible college. It was just a Bible first. Sitting at Jesus' feet, hearing his words. Months, a couple years had passed, and then she was back in her original default settings. What is our default setting? I think Paul and Silas capture it beautifully. They had every reason to be, got to be careful with my Australian vocabulary, to be ticked off. They had every reason to. Paul got the vision to go to this town. Can you recall the last time you felt that? That anger, that disappointment? God, you said. Leah and I, in that hotel room on that Wednesday morning, what is going on? Everything else has lined up. Everything has lined up. Your fingerprints on everything. The sale of the house. It was such a blessing to being able to finance this move, the visa process, confirmation from pastors, friends, family. Everything was lining up. And we just felt so helpless. But about midnight, Paul and Silas were praying and singing hymns to God. And the other prisoners were listening to them. In your heartache, in your discouragement, in your challenging seasons, the other prisoners are hearing you. Your family, they're watching. Your friends, your work colleagues, your neighbors, your husband or your wife, they're all watching. When was the last time you sat at Jesus' feet, not with an agenda, but just to enjoy his presence? You might be sitting here going, Jimmy, I'm way past where your mum was. I'm over here. But that book we refer to, the Bible that we live by, it is filled with story after story of people never being too far gone. What is your default setting? What should your default setting be? I wish I could stand here and claim that I was praying and singing hymns to Jesus, enjoying his presence regardless of the circumstances. But there was little moments. And that leads to my next thought. Who have you got in your life that can help correct you? Not the slap on the wrist, not that type of correction. I mean that loving friend or that group leader or that pastor, that person who's walking every step with you. I had Leah, with a lot of other people, but when that visa fell through, we had to find work straight away. We couldn't return back to the Gold Coast unless we paid for 2 weeks hotel quarantining at our own expense due to the COVID restrictions. So Leah, through that last job, they kept giving her pay rises and promotions. So then they found her short-term work in Tasmania, of all places, a small island south of Australia, the opposite of Chicago. When I say opposite, I mean the opposite of Chicago. And so we're there, not knowing when the next job offer is coming. I was singing, praying hymns to Jesus. I got that wrong. Praying, singing hymns to Jesus. Yet there was just little moments where I started doubting, questioning, God, what is going on here? And for those who know me, I'm a very dramatic, emotional person. I was sitting at a beautiful winery in Tasmania, sipping on an award-winning glass of wine. Ticked off. What are you doing, God? The phrase that I kept speaking out was, get me out of here. This is torture. I don't think I would have lasted 5 minutes in that prison cell. I would have been telling Paul and Silas to shut up. Leah was staying up late due to the time difference and getting up real early, interviewing for jobs. One finally did come around. It was about 2 months living in Tasmania with our 4 original suitcases, not knowing when we would arrive in Chicago for the race marked out for us. Point number 3 is stumbling but not falling.
Leah ended up securing a second job offer, and the miracle to this is it was a better wage, better position, better company, far bigger company. And so now the new journey started of the next visa process. From there, it all happened pretty quick. The visa appointment was on a Tuesday. Our visas arrived on a Thursday. On the Friday morning, we went and took our COVID tests. We had to show negative to be able to fly internationally. Friday afternoon, we received our negative results. So then I booked the next available flight to Chicago, which happened to be on that Sunday. I text Chris saying, hey, see you Sunday night, 11:30 p.m. We're arriving at the O'Hare Airport. To think that for the last couple of years, we'd been convinced on this, that God was tugging us in this direction, and to now find ourselves in the city of Chicago, in People Church, I'm speechless of just how kind God is, how good He is.
Stumbling but not falling. I'd use that as a point because in Psalm 37 it says, if the Lord delights in a man's way, He'll make his steps firm. Though we may stumble, we will not fall, for the Lord will uphold us with His hand. There was a whole lot of stumbling going on, a whole lot of stumbling. But the incredible thing about us being the righteousness of Him is not based on our own works, our own efforts, our own striving. It is simply the gift that Jesus died on the cross, has washed us clean, has made us 100% approved in our Heavenly Father's eyes. And so as we try and figure out the race marked out for us, God is there, nudging us, prompting us, helping us, so as we stumble, we will not fall. The icing on the cake part of this story, this testimony is, remember how I said it was end of June, early July, we were meant to have arrived in Chicago after 13, 14 years of a journey as singles and then as married, Leah and I. And at 11:30 p.m. on that Sunday night when we finally arrived, Australian time, it was 3:30 p.m. on our 7-year wedding anniversary. I just think that's so kind just to give that one final fingerprint on the race marked out for us. Not that we've arrived as in we can now put our feet up. It's just, we're just on one of the many steps. In the Bible, 7 means completeness. So for God to have used those 7 years of our marriage, equipping us, molding us, shaping us, setting us up, developing this default setting of what is the main thing. Regardless of how inspiring our story might be or how small the inspiring elements are, but to arrive and have that mindset of a Paul and Silas that no matter what happens, I'm going to sit at Jesus' feet every time and ask him, where do you want me? My life is not my own. And if there's awkward silences, then it doesn't mean that time with God is not well spent. What's our default setting? We're sitting at his feet without the agenda. Whether he speaks or not, we are just sitting there reminding ourselves of what Jesus did for us. The beating that he took, the bruises, the cuts, the whips, his body endured it all so we would be free from sickness, illness, diseases, any previous sporting injuries, and the blood that he shed, washing us clean. Do you know there is not a blemish on you? When you accept Jesus into your heart, there is not a blemish on you. You are as white as snow, 100% approved in our Heavenly Father's eyes. Whether you dominate this race marked out for you, or if you're just stumbling, tripping over on every corner, finding yourself removed from that default setting, know that God does not turn his eyes away from you. Now, I know my story out of this series, this month-long series, there's others where their stories may be more dramatic, more inspiring. But the biggest takeaway from this is, if it matters to you, it matters to God.